Welcome everyone to the Town of Greater Napanee regular session of council for the 12th day of November 2024. Just before we get started, we apologize. We had an extended closed session meeting this evening and also an extended committee of adjustment. So here we are at 8 o'clock, but we're going to fight our way through this. So again, welcome. And just before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that this evening's meeting is going to be live streamed and placed on our YouTube channel. So the folks that can't be here this evening have the opportunity to watch it later this evening or tomorrow or anytime into eternity. So thanks for waiting for us and welcome. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll start with our closed session matter first. I'll look for a motion to rise and report from closed session. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. I'd like to report that in closed session this evening, Council approved the closed session minutes of October 22nd, 2024, received legal advice regarding the parks bylaw, and received reports regarding personal information about identifiable individuals and labor relation matters, and gave direction to staff. I'd also look to for a resolution from closed session that council authorize an expense of up to $64,300 in additional contracted services to complete the required 2023 audit work, and further that council authorize this cost to be temporarily funded from reserves in 2024 with a repayment of the reserves amount to be incorporated into the 2025 budget recommendation. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next up, we'll look for a motion for the adoption of the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? The motion's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none. We'll start this evening's meeting off with a public meeting under the authority of the Planning Act. We'll look for a motion to go into the public meeting, to convene the public meeting, sorry. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? The motion's carried. See Michael's at the front desk. So Michael, whenever you're, first of all, I guess I should ask, is there anyone here to speak for or against this public meeting with respect to the matter that's in this public meeting? Yeah, yes, sir. Welcome. So we have the planner for the proponent, and if we'll give you an opportunity to speak, sir, once Michael goes through the report and his recommendation, and if you don't want to, you don't have to either. So we do have an applicant 12123-045 Canada Inc., Gunaraja, Thuraisingham, Deepa, Gunaraja, and GDK Holdings Limited. Legal description is lot 25 on the south side of Mill Street, registered plan number 82, part 1 on plan 29R 6957, part 1, and plan 29R 4141, the town of Greater Napanee, county of Lennox and Addington. And Michael, the floor will be yours when you're ready.
Thank you, Worship. So this public meeting is following on the heels of the Committee of Adjustment deliberations that were just had, related to the severance of the southerly half of 90 Mill Street. Ultimately, what this application is seeking approval for is to establish site-specific zoning performance standards for allowing the ultimate development of a semi-detached dwelling on the lands to be severed under those applications considered under the through the Committee of Adjustment. And one of the conditions that is proposed to be imposed when that decision is rendered is that a rezoning be applied for and successfully obtained to lay out the regulatory provisions for development of the parcels. So ultimately, the lot at or the property rather at 90 Mill Street is a through lot that has frontage on both Mill Street West and Water Street West, and the intention is to sever the southerly portion of that property to be coincident with the lot line to the west between at 92 Mill Street West, so in line with that rear yard lot line. Ultimately, this would result in the relocation of the parking for 90 Mill Street West, which would need to be gained through the rear yard of 92 Water Street West. And through the Committee of Adjustment deliberations, the committee gave direction that the applications be deferred to allow for additional time to add additional parking spaces for 92 Water Street West as a result of those applications. Additionally, we'll be looking into the feasibility or support for increasing the front yard setback proposed for the semi-detached dwelling, proposed to be constructed on both the severed lot and the property immediately abutting to the west that's already an existing separate lot today. So the intention there is for the demolition of the existing building at the corner of Robinson Street and Water Street, northeast corner, to be demolished to make room for development of this semi-detached dwelling, spanning both that westerly parcel and new to be created easterly parcel. The location and placement of the existing dwellings fronting onto Mill Street, so 90 and 92 Mill Street West, are proposed to remain, and no changes is proposed to those buildings. So the change is adding additional parking and relocation of the parking serving 90 Mill Street West, and construction of a new semi-detached dwelling on the southerly portion of the property. So holding the public meeting tonight, we would be seeking any feedback from the public that may not have yet been received through the circulation of the notice of public meeting that was undertaken in accordance with the Planning Act. To date, staff have not received any comments, questions, or concerns as a result of that circulation pertaining to this public meeting tonight.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Is there any questions or comments from Michael with respect to his report or his presentation? Seeing none, sir, did you wish to weigh in, or are you good with the information that Mr. Knowles has provided us? Yeah, we'll, being a public meeting, we won't look for any kind of a resolution or anything for deferral, but we'll, I know that that's sort of the direction that we took in the Committee of Adjustment, but thank you. That's correct. So if there's nothing you'd like to add, we appreciate you being here, sir, and giving us the ability to ask if we had any questions. Yep, come on up, sir. I'll just get you to, once again, for the folks that didn't watch the Committee of Adjustment, we'll just get you to identify yourself as well.
Yeah, for the record, through your worship, my name is Sean Legere, Senior Planner with RFA Planning Consultant. I'm the agent for this application. There's just two things. My colleague here and I were chatting during the break between the Committee of Adjustment meeting and Council meeting, and just two things that came to mind with respect to an increased front yard setback to accommodate greater depth between the sidewalk and the building. The parking space, I just want to highlight that the plan is is in accordance with the larger parking space that is designed or prescribed in the zoning bylaw, being 3 meters by 6 meters. So we have accounted for the larger space already, and as prescribed in the zoning bylaw. And I also wish to highlight that the semi-detached plan for these lands matches is the same as that which was recently approved just 2 doors down at 78 Mill Street a year or two ago. I don't recall the exact date, but it's the exact same building, exact same arrangements, exact same dimensions it's just, I guess, it's more of a highlight that this was already approved. These standards were already approved and used just 2 doors down last year. And so I just wanted to highlight that, and that we will be discussing this further with my colleague here in the applicant. But I just wanted to highlight that as well, that potentially looking for some consistency with previous decisions as well. So I just, again, my colleague and I were talking about these standards during the break, and we'll be in further discussions. But I just wanted to highlight these items for you.
No, and we greatly appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Is there any questions, Mr. Legere, before we close the public meeting? Seeing none, thank you, sir, for coming and spending the evening with us. We greatly appreciate it. We'll look for a motion to adjourn the public meeting. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of the motion? Opposed, the motion's carried. Deputations, I don't believe we have any scheduled deputations this evening. Deputations with respect to items on the agenda, and I don't believe we have any of those. And finally, correspondence items on the agenda, I don't believe we have any of those, which will take us into the unfinished business portion of the agenda. And I don't believe we have any unfinished business. And we'll move directly into the administrative consent agenda. And just bear with us, it's a little bit lengthy, but not too bad, actually. First off, we have the council minutes for the regular session of council, October 22nd, 2024, and the special sessions of council, October 29, 2024, and November 6, 2024. Is there anything in those minutes anyone on council would like to ask any questions about or speak to? Seeing none. Next up is the committee minutes, Market Square Advisory Committee and the Municipal Heritage Committee. Is there anything in those minutes from those committees that anyone would like to bring to our attention or ask any questions about? And would any of the council members that are on those committees like to speak to it? And go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. On behalf of the Market Square Committee, Advisory Committee, we were very proud to have a meeting and produce these minutes. And out of these minutes in the meeting became a report back to council with some recommendations for improvements to this building. And just happy to keep the momentum going. And the committee's very happy that council has taken their recommendations and have approved those. And there's so many to talk about, but we're going to be working on the downstairs for inside use and the outside. We're going to do some more improvements. So just keep an eye on this area because we're not done. Thank you.
And we do appreciate that, Councillor Pennell. I mean, there's still people talking about the paint on the outside of the building. So I agree with you. We want to keep the momentum going with the good news that's coming out of the Market Square area. So thank you for that. Yep, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
After seeing all the advisory committee minutes over the last 2 years, this was one of the most, I was extremely happy to see it. You know what I mean? There's always proactive things. The CAO definitely attended the meeting, as I could see, and, you know, spearheaded a lot of those things too. So congratulations on all parties, but everything that I saw made sense, and it's going to make the town that much better in the downtown. So congratulations to the committee and our CAO, Matthew, and what he's done with that too. And I was really optimistic when I read that whole report. It was really good.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Shank. If there's nothing else with respect to the Market Square Committee, we can speak to the Municipal Heritage Committee. Is there anything in that report that anyone has any questions to? And Councillor Martin, did you wish to highlight anything with respect to the committee?
No, thank you, Mayor. No, I'll let the report speak for itself, basically. I think the minutes captured everything that we were into at the last meeting. So in the interest of time, I'll skip that.
Thank you, Councillor Martin, and we do appreciate that. Thank you. If there's nothing further, we also have the correspondence for information items dated November 12th, 2024. And I know that we've all had an opportunity to see them. Is there anything in those that correspondence anyone would like to pull out or have a conversation about? Seeing none, having said all of that, I look for a motion that council consent to the approval of the following routine items: that the minutes of the regular session of council dated October 22nd, 2024, and the special sessions of council dated October 29th, 2024, and November 6th, 2024 be adopted as presented. That the Market Square Advisory Committee and the Municipal Heritage Committee minutes of October 10th, 2024, October 10th through to 24th, 2024 be received for information. That the correspondence for information dated November 12th, 2024 be received. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Pennell. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next up is items for consideration. First one is the 2025 Community Budget Survey Report. And Mr. Grant, are you going to speak to that first?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through your worship to members of council. I'd like to present the 2025 results of the Citizen Budget Survey. Every year when we're going out to do a survey, we like to go out to the community and ask them how do they feel about our services? Are there areas they'd like us to improve? Are there ways that they would like to see their monies invested, and any other sort of ideas that we might garner from them? As we move forward, it is my intention to bring forward different policies on public engagement. So you'll see this survey continue, but also expand and evolve, because I appreciate council is interested in receiving feedback from the community, and we're interested in collecting it for you. So for this year's budget survey, we had a total of 83 individuals that completed the survey. Largest number of individuals indicated they were over the age of 55, with 65% of respondents indicating they were over the age of 45. Respondents were equally split among the town's wards. The majority of respondents indicated they had lived in Napanee for 10 years or more. In terms of the top rated services, respondents felt were good or very good. 66% of respondents said that they felt waste collection was good or very good. 65% felt winter maintenance, road maintenance was good or very good. 53% thought road maintenance in the summer months was good or very good. And 51% felt fire was good or very good. In terms of areas that citizens felt that could use our attention, bylaw enforcement, 55% felt the service was poor or very poor, and I would say that it was likely a reflection to the ongoing challenges that we're having with respect to bylaw enforcement in parks, but that's my perspective. Parks and trails, 42% felt the service was poor or very poor. Events and programming was an area identified for improvement, and land use planning. Citizens identified some areas they'd like to see more investments from the municipality. 59% of respondents felt they wanted to see increases in bylaw services. 48% wanted to see an increase in parks and trail investments. 46% wanted to see more investments in road maintenance, and 40% wanted to see more investments in events and programming. And very few citizens wanted to see a reduction in service in any area. But that is a high-level overview. We've incorporated that feedback into our budget deliberations, and some of those things will be reflected and have been identified by staff and members of council themselves. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Is there any questions or comments for Matthew with respect to his report or presentation? Seeing none, we do have a recommendation the staff or that council received for information, the 2025 Community Budget Survey Report. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? The motion's carried. Next up is starting point for the Greater Napanee 2025 budget. And Ms. Hamill, I see you're at the front. You're going to speak to that first, or is Mr. Grant?
I was going to start us out, Mr. Mayor, and then I will turn things over to our CFO.
The floor is yours.
As members of council are aware, and members of the public are likely aware, we are set for a very difficult budget year. There is driving this year's budget increases will be areas that council does not have control over, primarily increases in service fees for our contract with the Ontario Provincial Police, which is around 23%, equaling about a 6.1% tax increase that we are obligated to pay. And then we are seeing increases in fees from the Quinte Conservation Authority, and that's their increases have gone up 12% this year, mainly related to capital investments, and a minor increase in the Cataraqui Conservation Authority. There will be obviously taxes levied by the counties of Lennox and Addington and school board costs. We see drivers, utility costs. We expect to be a driver this year. We expect insurance premiums to be a driver this year, and inflation was a minor driver and not necessarily what we'd have seen in previous years. Some of these challenges, we are currently finalizing the budget for an SLT, our senior leadership recommendation to members of council. We appreciate that council over the years has created a tax advantage for members of the community. We have an average tax bill with garbage fees in of $1,567 combined urban and rural. That's roughly 20% lower than the surrounding areas. But council has been clear with a tough budget year. They want to keep residents in mind, and we're going to do our best to keep the municipal portion as reasonable as we can, while still bringing forward what we see as necessary items for your attention. But the challenge ahead with $1 million increase from the OPP, the starting point we are starting at is a minimum of 6.31% before we've looked at any of our own needs. And just by way of reminder, council has two primary avenues to address budgetary pressures. It's raising revenues through property taxes, charges, and fees, and decreasing service levels. And those are your main levers. I will turn things over to the CFO just to give you a brief overview of what to expect in the coming days and how the budget will be addressed.
Thanks, Mr. Grant. Go ahead, Ellen.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just providing council with a brief update and overview of, as Matthew said, what the next few days budget meetings are going to look like. So on our first scheduled budget meeting on Tuesday, we're going to start with just an overall kind of financial view of where things are at for the town, kind of a snapshot of the big drivers. So some of our reserve balances, what our unfunded capital looks like, some of the funding gaps that we'll have on our capital needs before we get into the departmental details. So the first, it's probably the first half of Tuesday, we'll look at some of those discussions and also look at council specific budget as it relates to the committees, boards, and donations. And then once we've kind of gone over that general overview, we'll move into departmental details. So each department will have an opportunity to present to council what their current budget is and any budget enhancements that they have requested that have all been discussed and vetted through SLT. So both on the operating side for any budget enhancements that they see, in addition to any capital requests that they have. Staff have spent a significant amount of time on this work leading up to these meetings, making sure that we're providing council with a budget that we feel meets the critical needs of those departments. And you'll see the items that we have included for recommendation that we feel can fit within a level of increase that council potentially could support. And then we will also be addressing kind of at the end of those presentations, additional needs of departments that we understand cannot come forward for recommendation at this point in time, given the budget constraints that we are facing and the tough budget year that we are against. But we do think it's important for council to see still what those needs are, even though that they aren't being recommended as part of this budget process. So we have a long few days ahead of us, but I think there's a lot of really good information that we'll be sharing with you. And we look forward to starting those discussions on Tuesday.
And just to add to that, one of the things that council will see in this year's budget process is a rating system that the senior leadership team has gone through. And what you'll see is ratings based on critical need. Do we see something that, if not addressed, might lead to a service disruption? Is there a legal risk or a financial risk associated with that? There will be something that's deemed like highly important. Is something related to council direction, legislative policy or requirements? And then is there something that's needed for service improvements, service enhancements, perhaps lead to cost savings, that sort of thing? We're going to rate those items based on that scale, and as well as including anything that's been approved in principle by council. So both in the aggregate, when you see the list, you'll see how those things have been rated by SLT from a corporate perspective. And then you'll also see individually when divisions and departments present their budgets and their budget requests, you'll see the associated ranking, and you'll know that this meets the criteria of critical from the perspective of senior leadership, highly, high priority or important. And as Ellen mentioned, you'll also see the things that didn't quite make the list, but we think is important to bring to your attention, but aren't being recommended at this time.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Grant. Does anybody have any questions or comments for either Alan or Mr. Grant with respect to the report or the presentation? Seeing none, thank you, folks. I think we're all of the opinion that we're going to spend a lot of time looking at this year's budget. And we desperately hope that there won't be any more surprises. And we will get through it, but we're really going to have to sharpen our pencils. And I do think we have the ability to do it. And then, of course, there's always the Hail Mary that maybe our friends at the province will help us out with respect to the OPP bill. But I don't think we want to take that just to the bank just yet. But thank you for all the hard work that you've done on it so far. And we look forward to our budget meetings next week. Look for a motion to note and receive the staff report presentation with respect to starting point for the Greater Napanee 2025 budget. Moved by Councillor Norrie, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? The motion's carried. Next up is the Napanee Area Community Health Center Conditions Agreement. And Ms. Hamill, you're going to speak to that one.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council, this report is for your information. We are reporting, or happy to report, that the Community Health Center has confirmed that they have met the targeted requirements in the agreement of meeting 15 or more full-time equivalent MDs and NPs. So they have met that threshold, which means that we continue to provide our 100% commitment to that program, and we'll continue to make those contributions through that gifting agreement to them.
Great. Thanks, Ellen. Is there any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Cower.
Yes, through you, Your Worship. This program has been phenomenal. I've had nothing but good talks, good conversations. People are getting phone calls, so on and so forth. Very happy with this program. Now, they've met their criteria of 15. Are they going to try to get more, or is that just, are they capped at the 15, or where are we at there?
Through Your Worship, perhaps Matthew has more to add, but the confirmation that was provided that they have exceeded the 15, but I'm not sure to what extent that has been exceeded.
To the Deputy Mayor, as the recipient of this portfolio, I'm going to have to review the document, and I can certainly get back to council with that information.
Well, that is excellent. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calvers. Councillor Shank.
Yeah, there is more than 15. And with the nurse practitioners, and I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this or not. We're participating in the enrollment that's going to be happening here. Almost 100% of residents of the Greater Napanee.
I was going to speak to that, Councillor Shank, just briefly.
That's your, I'll let you do that.
We do, and I know that they've publicized it fairly well, but I think we need to take the opportunity to continue to publicize it. This is that KCHC now has an enrollment, or I can't think of the exact term, with respect to getting every citizen in this municipality on access to primary health care. It's currently, they're engaged in that right now at the arena, and they were there today, and they'll be there through to the end of the week. And I would encourage that if you haven't received a phone call from them now, and you are on the list, to show up at the arena. make sure you bring some identification that shows that you're from the town of Greater Napanee, and please show up. I mean, the whole purpose of this week's exercise is to get as many of, and I think there's somewhere in around, I think it's around the 4,000 range. I know they've got about 1,000 already signed up. They want to try and get everyone signed up to have access to primary health care, hopefully by the end of the week. So they've done a magnificent job of getting the physicians and the nurse practitioners hired, and now they're trying their best to try and get everybody to have access to primary health care. So if you haven't received a call, but you are enrolled in the program, I would suggest that you show up at the arena. It's for the next 3 days, and I think the times just escape me, but I think it's around 9 to 4 or 9 to 5 through to the end, through to Friday. I was up there today in an unrelated matter, and it wasn't very busy up there, and I was quite surprised. So, folks, we've worked very hard to give everyone an opportunity to have access to primary health care. So please take advantage of it if you can. So I'm excited to hear that they've got the staff that they require to fulfill this role. And I think we're on the leading edge of good things to happen in this province. At least I'm hoping so, because it's been an extremely, extremely successful program. So thank you, Councillor Shank, for bringing that up. Is there anything else? Go ahead, Mike.
Maybe you can answer this, but should we ever look into seeing if we could patent this, what we came up with the, so why should the province, I'm just trying to think, they're billing us, and it was with everybody collaboratively with the doctors and everything else coming up with this. So there should be some remuneration. I'm just thinking other ways, because when we just had the horror story of the budget is coming down, and here we are solving the solution in little old town of Greater Napanee. So
I'm not sure about patenting it, but I think there is some success knowing the fact that, from what I've read in media, that the province has hired Dr. Jane Philpott, who was down at Queen's University, who is a pioneer with respect to this periwinkle model. And the province has gone to great lengths to hire her. And when I hear the words that were coming from Ms. Philpott with respect to, hopefully within the next 5 years, to have everyone in this province assigned to primary health care, which is the very same words that were spoken when she was down here. I'm hopeful that the province is looking at the model that we've adopted, and are going to assist not only our municipality, but every municipality in this province with respect to some financial assistance, because I think it's a model that we need to move to. It works from what I can see, and I know it works in our municipality, it works in the city of Kingston. So I would be very hopeful that our friends of the province are watching what's going on here, and they're going to assist us to be successful in the years to come.
not to belabor this, the only reason why is healthcare is provincial. We pay our provincial taxes. So that's why where I was saying there's, what it's cost this municipality, cost the taxpayers. So that's where I was kind of going that avenue of.
And I agree with you, Mike. It's I'm hopeful our friends of the province see the success that we're having down here, but also under this understanding that healthcare is under the purview of the province, and we've made broken trail, and rightfully so. So I'm hoping that they're going to see the great successes and say, hey, we want to be a part of this and we want to help you out. So because this council and staff at the town, we got very aggressive with this, and we needed to get aggressive with this because we had in the area 5,000 people out of a community of 17,000 people that weren't attached to a family doctor, didn't have access to primary health care. We're upwards of almost 33%, right? So and we've been able to resolve that. And so I'm very hopeful, and hoping that if our friends at the province are listening, that, we broke trail on this, but we are also going to need some assistance to sustain what's going on here. So Thank you very much. Is there anything else? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion to note and receive the report with respect to the Napanee Area Community Health Center Conditions Agreement. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. 2024 in-kind donation report. And Alan, you're going to speak to that whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me. Before you, excuse me. I have a report for your information. So as part of the newly developed community grants policy, which was adopted in 2023, there is a requirement to present to council the in-kind and cash donations that were provided to our community. As you'll see here in the attachment, we have gathered the information from various departments on what types of in-kind donations we are currently offering. There is approximately $56,000 total in in-kind donation, and we also provide a total of approximately $46,000 in cash donations. At this time, this is an information report for council, but we do suspect that we will revisit these conversations during budget, and further conversations will continue to happen as we revisit what some of these agreements historically have looked like, and what formalized direction we need from council to continue providing this if that's the will of council.
Great. Thanks, Alan. And Mr. Grant, did you wish to add into it before we open the floor to the members of council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would suggest, I've mentioned this to council before, but I think that we'll also want to do a broader fees and charges review, just so council has a sense of where we're sitting with the fees and charges that we allocate for the services that we provide, how that relates to the costs that are required to provide that service. And we would bring that forward for information and direction if there's any further action needed in the new year.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. And I know that we'll probably be having some conversations with respect to this during our budget conversations. Would it be your recommendation that, I mean, this is the first time we're seeing this evening. So, and I'm guessing that some of these in-kind things are fairly dated. Would it be your recommendation that we revisit and to come up with some form of policy? Because I'm thinking that we have policy with respect to maybe some, but not all, and maybe it's an area that we should look at cleaning up.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I would think that we would want some policy and criteria for when these kinds of arrangements are offered, under what circumstances and conditions. I think the number one thing that we would want is certainty at the staff level that it is the will of council that these things are provided and the criteria in which they're done. And we can certainly bring forward a policy framework for council's consideration.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Grant. Is there any questions or comments of council? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Yeah, Alan, Matthew, there's a Tourig fund that municipality, it was basically a host municipality agreement. Is there any way of getting a report on that, of where we're standing, what year we are at? I can't remember exactly, but I know it's dealt at arm's length, but you know, that question will be asked, you know, in kind of where they're going to go, where they're not going to go, what can we do, what we can't do. Just if you could throw that into the mix and have that for when we're discussing it also, because it was by the municipality that this was driven also. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. Is there any other questions or comments before we look for a motion? Seeing none, I know that we do have a recommendation to note and receive this report. Would it be helpful that when we do revisit these things at budget time, that we see, you know, some form of a history as to how we got to where we are? And I know that it's not really related to budget time, but sometime in the foreseeable future that we create some form of a policy with respect to how we I guess, police these things. Would that make any sense? Like I say, I know we're going to have a discussion about it, and a lot of these things, I mean, they're extremely important to our municipality. They really are. You know, most of them are dealing with seniors or children, so it's very important that we keep those folks active. But I do think that we need to clean up or just create some type of policy with respect to it. So go ahead, Mr. Grant.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that we can do our absolute best to give you a bit of a history lesson of how we got to where we are. We can bring forward a policy framework and give council some options. You may decide that you want the policy to apply equally across the board. You may decide that there are a policy that you implement on a go forward basis. But it is the privilege of council to decide what constitutes social good. And if that's done within a policy framework, I would say it'd be easier to administer. So I would absolutely agree with that.
Great, thank you, sir. And would you like a motion with respect to that, or include in the note and receive resolution, or the conversations that we've had this evening, is that direction enough?
Mr. Mayor, I think we can take that as direction, and any policy framework that we bring in would be building on the one that we have, which institutes that, and then talking about that and how it specifically relates to some of the things that predate historically, some of those things that have happened. And so we'll put our shoulder to the wheel and give some options.
Great. I know I appreciate it, and I'm sure the rest of council appreciates that immensely. So thank you. If there's nothing else, we'll look for a motion to note and receive the 2024 in-kind donation report. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next up is the Greater Napanee Advisory Committee bylaw. And Mr. Grant, you're going to speak to.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to members of council. So by way of overview, over the past several months, I've had the opportunity to take a look at our advisory committee structure, our advisory committee function, maybe how we compare to best practice, and to develop some recommendations in the form of a policy for council's consideration. And I would say that from the beginning, before I get into sort of the background and the recommendations, I would say that the community has a lot to be proud of in terms of its community spirit. I know that I had the good fortune to attend with a member of council, a volunteer committee, not of council, but in the community. And hearing the interest for the betterment of the community was uplifting. It's and in communities this size, it is volunteerism that fuels many of the engines. And I would say that volunteerism is alive and well in Greater Napanee. In the course of my review, what I have seen, and this review included a survey of advisory committee members themselves, 25 of which were kind enough to answer some of the questions I had about their experience, and how we might best harness their expertise for recommendations to come forward with council. I did note some areas for, that we may want to address to make sure that advisory committees are serving council with their recommendations as best as possible. Some of the things that I noted is there have been occasions where staff have occasionally moved beyond procedural guidance to assisting with the setting of agendas for advisory committees, which I would suggest makes it sometimes challenging for advisory committees to sort of bring their own ideas forward. There have been some occasions where advisory committees have operated beyond an advisory capacities and occupied positions of operations or financial matters. The one thing that I saw, and I know it was noted in the survey, was not having a specifically formal process other than the minutes that were in the agenda this evening for bringing forward council committee recommendations for council deliberations. And an example I would use of what that could look like in action is what we did with the Market Square committee where those recommendations were brought forward to council, they were deliberated, they were decided on, and they become operationalized. So I think there's improvements that we can make there. There have been occasion where staff has taken on work through advisory committees that may have come at the expense of their own operational duties. And I would say that I've noticed in terms of best practice that it's unusual to have council members serve as chairs of the committees. And it might make it somewhat confusing between the duties of a member of council on council and their advisory committee capacity. When I surveyed the members of advisory committees, some of the things that stood out to me in the survey that we did is approximately half of respondents felt that their advisory committee meetings were productive. 50% agreed that they adequately understood their roles, which I would suggest there's some room for improvement there. Approximately 60% said they were satisfied with the work of the committee. 62% said they felt that they understood the mandate of their committee. 70% thought that it made a difference. Their work made a difference. And 78% agreed that the meetings were open and they felt invited. And 70% agreed that they would serve on a committee again. And my takeaways from this and why I brought forward an advisory committee bylaw has been done in many other communities is to achieve greater clarity in the role of advisory committees. I think a policy framework, a bylaw framework around that, where we clarify roles and responsibilities, embed those into processes within the municipality to bring forward those recommendations to council. I think that would result in a greater harnessing of that volunteer effort. Some of the most frequent recommendations I heard from committee members in their surveys, they really be interested in more training, education, and resources. Ensuring advisory committees can set their own agendas and minutes are published promptly. Having a clear mechanism for recommendations to be presented to council for consideration. Clear guidance on what decisions require council approval. There was interest in alternating roles between the chair, the vice chair, and anyone operating in a secretary role throughout the committee's term. Being clear on what staff support for committees includes. Reducing the overlap that was perceived between certain advisory committees. And there was an interest in restricting participation on Greater Napanee advisory committees to residents of Greater Napanee. And so those were the survey findings. In the bylaw that you have before you, what I have proposed to clarify is, what are the purpose of the committees? Ways in which committees are formed and quorum, how committee mandates are created and revised, how committees are dissolved, meeting procedures, role clarity, how the clerk's office assists, attendance requirements, use and availability of town resources, fiduciary duties, public communications guidance, agendas, how committees can access town resources, meeting schedules. It would provide a clear policy framework, be accompanied by education materials such as a guide, as well as, for lack of a better term, like a cheat sheet also. Training could be provided and should be provided to committee members as well as staff to understand how best that we can ensure that committees function to their greatest capacity. You'll notice within the budget or the recommendations within the report itself, that I'm recommending that council direct us to bring forward renewed mandates for your consideration. Council being 2 years into their term and advisory committees being advisory in nature, I think it would be prudent to revisit those mandates to ensure that they're meeting the interest and needs of council, to ensure that you're receiving advice that you believe will aid you in your decision making. And my intention, if it is the will of council, is to bring those forward in the coming weeks for council's deliberation and adoption, at which point they would be delivered to the committees, as well as education and training provided to staff members that assist the committees. So that is, in a nutshell, what my recommendations are with the advisory committee bylaw that is attached. I am proposing that we visit this for discussion at a later meeting so people have a chance to review the material, ask questions. Members of the public who are interested can review it. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Does anybody have any questions with respect to Matthew's report or his presentation? Councillor Bernal.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Matthew, one of the things that you mentioned in your report that kind of stood out to me was 51% understand of the committee members understand the role. And when we think back and we look at the committees and we have a council person as the chair, and then we have a staff person as the liaison, I can see how sometimes where committees think, okay, here's my report, here's my agenda, I'll like what's been said, I'll put up my hand, and the meeting will be over, and I'm not really sure what my role is. And I'm excited to see a change come where we get the committee members more actively involved in the committee itself and have somebody else other than the council person as chair, and have that chair and vice chair come up with the agendas and stuff like that. So I'm really excited for that. At a later date, maybe we'll talk about your two-term limits. I think that's, although volunteerism in the town of Greater Napanee is vibrant, we still have a little bit of a problem having people put in their resumes. And I would hate for a line in a bylaw to restrict the momentum of a committee, but we can talk about that. And just one other thing that I noticed in your report, you said training, and you put an approximate budget of $8,000 on that. I'm just wondering, in your mind, what would training look like for us, for a committee?
Sure. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council Brunel. We have done some research and review of training options, and what I would suggest that would look like would be everything from, being very specific about this is the role of the committee and these are the mandates, to, how to run a meeting similar to a council meeting with Robert's Rules of Order. And then process and procedure for how their discussions turn into recommendations, how they make their way to council. So everyone understands how the process works, similar to how a council meeting works, to make sure they can harness the best ideas, that they're sure when they have consensus, that they understand how that process is going to be work and how it's documented, and bringing somebody in who specializes in providing those meetings and bringing them in as a group. Where they can also have the opportunity to answer questions, have the opportunity to understand where the parameters are of an advisory committee, and what specifically their role would be in the municipal process.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brunel. Councillor Nori.
Through your worship, you alluded to this morning, we had a meeting. And one of the members at that meeting mentioned he got this whole package. Do all committee members of all committees get this to peruse all this package? Because one of them said he had it. I'm just curious.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe you're asking if they got the whole council package that's before us today.
He alluded he got a package. Is it a Coles Notes of this for the committee members to do? And did they all get that? I'm just knowing what to say to my committee, that's all.
Sure. So in this process, both with the survey that was conducted, as well as when the materials were put together, I did my best to stay in touch with all advisory committee members that were on that list. Everyone that sits on advisory committee and people who may have recently been on advisory committee, including the Downtown Advisory Committee. So they were given an overview of this is what I'm looking to do. I invited them to participate in a survey. I provided them with the survey results, and then I sent them the link once it was posted publicly saying this is now live on the town's website, and I encourage you to review it and forward any questions you may have.
Great, thank you, Councillor Nori. Is there any other questions or comments for Matthew before we look for a motion to receive? Seeing none, we do have a staff recommendation that council receive the report proposed advisory committee bylaw, and further that council direct that the draft advisory committee bylaw and draft committee terms of reference be brought to the November 26th meeting for further consideration, and further that council direct staff to include advisory committee orientation costs as part of the 2025 budget process, and further that council direct staff to initiate the annual advisory committee mandate review process inclusive of the mandate recommendations for council's consideration. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Grant. Next up is draft update Parks and Public Spaces bylaw and encampment review protocol. And I see Madam Clerk going to the front desk. Whenever you're ready, Jess, the floor will be yours.
They can't hear.
And I maybe have made an assumption that you'll be starting. Am I correct with that?
So through your worship, there are just a few points with this staff report that I would like to highlight for council's awareness and for any residents who may be watching. With this report, we have incorporated all of the feedback that we received, both from residents, from councillors, and from town staff. And you can see the track changes and reasons for those changes. The updated map, I will note, is not 100% perfect. It is here to help visualize what the proposed buffers look like. There are a few minor amendments that will still need to be made. Our intention would be, when council adopts a bylaw and those buffers and exclusions are finalized, at that point, we would go through the map with a fine-tooth comb, make sure that it is completely accurate, and then work to make copies of that available to our service partners, to staff, to council, to anyone who would like to use that as a communication tool. Because we do think that will be helpful for those conversations. But I just wanted to flag that we know that it's not perfect. One of the things, for example, is that restriction on the entirety of Conservation Park, well proposed in the bylaw, is not in this map because it makes it harder to see what the other buffer zones look like when you have multiple buffers layered. Just a couple other points based on feedback survey that I wanted to stress. There is a difference between public property and private property when it comes to charter rights for self-sheltering. There is no charter right to shelter oneself on private property. That is why this bylaw only speaks to public property. And in addition, we have received legal advice that even amongst publicly owned property, there appears to be a difference in court cases to date and case law between public property that's generally assumed to be available for any member of the public, such as a park or a green space or an open space, and publicly owned property that is still not open to any general member of the public, such as a locked or gated yard, shop, active construction site. So we want to make sure that there's a clear distinction between those areas. And yeah, if there's any other questions about anything in here, I'd be happy to respond to those questions.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I'll just start off by thanking you and staff for the hard work that you put into this. I think we've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. We've had no less than 2 public meetings. We've had surveys. We spent an extremely a lot of time with respect to this parks bylaw, and we needed to, and we should. So I just want to thank you for that. And I'll open up the floor. Do any members of council have any questions or comments with respect to the presented bylaw that's before us today? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
I echo the mayor's comments. I know this is not going to solve the problem, but it's going to hopefully manage some of the problems. No, I've gone through it. Sure, I would like to tweak this and tweak that, but it's going to be it's going to be a document that we can at least start with, that we can be able to hopefully manage some of the problems that we have, that it doesn't occur that we had the extent that we had this year. One other thing is that during a construction site that we have, that any areas of, public property where there's a construction site, that there's got to be some avenue that any of the individuals that may happen to be in that area can be removed. You know what I mean? Just for the safety of those individuals, or any possible entanglements anywhere else. If staff could look into that, and you know which area that I'm talking about. So that was it. And Jessica and staff and the SLT team and everybody that's had partaked in this, I know it's not going to solve all the problems, but council and municipalities are in an extreme awkward position, all right, throughout Canada, and because of the case law that was done. So I think this is a fair process, and like we did with the medical, we have to change the business plan to see how it can work and how we can't work and what will work. So putting everybody's heads together, I think hopefully this is going to be a lot better, because it definitely impacted the business and it impacted the tourism that we would have in a small town like this. And thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Shank. Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Jessica, to go from not having nothing as a bylaw to what you've produced here is fantastic. It's very in-depth and complex as well. So it's a real tough subject for the encampments and such, but we also needed the whole bylaw to touch on other items that we have going on that's not included with the unhoused and people like that. So it was very refreshing to see, and as Councillor Shank says, it gives us something to grow on. So, but thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Pennell. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Calvin, then I'll go to Councillor Martin.
Yeah, this is got to go with everybody else's opinion on this. This is an amazing bylaw put together. It covers a lot of different things for sure. It's very well put together, well done. My concern is enforcement of this bylaw. But right now, we don't have an actual bylaw officer. Is there anybody on staff that can enforce these bylaws that are coming forth?
So through your worship, our intention would be, depending on what the specific section of the bylaw is, there's certainly a lot of provisions of this bylaw that could be enforced by our contracted enforcement officers. For example, feeding wildlife on municipal properties, having your pets interfering with other people's enjoyment of public amenities, defacing municipal property. Those are all things that would be well within the scope of that contract. When it comes specifically to the enforcement of the encampment protocol, we would be looking for education-based compliance as is outlined in that protocol to start with. Our intent would always be that the first encounter with an individual is, did you know we have a protocol? You are currently too close to that playground there. We need you to move somewhere that is not so close to that playground. Here's a map you may want to look at to help you inform about where you should be located. Also, can we get you in touch with social services, other agencies, anybody who might be able to help you figure out a more permanent, secure, stable living situation? If that fails to work, that's the point where we would be looking to hopefully partner again with our other agencies on next steps, issuing trespass orders, et cetera. But we do believe that at least those initial steps can certainly be done with existing resources.
Yep, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calvert.
Okay, so and thank you for that. In section 11, it's protective persons and property. 11.5, we should maybe change the wording to that. It says no person shall have in their possession on any municipal property any firearm, air gun, bow and arrow, axe, knife, or other weapons, improvised weapons. we should probably change that to municipal properties outside versus inside, because we do rent one of our facilities to a group that does shoot their bows indoors. So that should be maybe modified a little bit, but other than that, it's perfect.
Through your worship, I did initially have the language in there to say unless a rental agreement stipulates otherwise, and our lawyers wanted to know why I had that in there, but I think that is exactly why, and we could probably do a minor amendment to put that in place, or have it within the rental contract that this section does not apply based on the terms of the rental contract.
And I
Yeah,
think,
something to that effect would be great. Thank you.
and I think Mr. Grant wants to weigh in.
Sure, just through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor, and just to add to the clerk's original comments, I would suggest a bylaw of this nature, particularly the encampment protocol. Before we would enter anything to do with enforcement, I would recommend a period of education more broadly. This represents, new legislation for the community. There would need to be communications materials developed, consultation with our partners about how that's going to work. And so I would say there would be a ramping up period, certainly. And that would be consistent with most other municipalities who've engaged in this kind of, municipal legislation, but also behavior change takes time, and giving people the tools they need is probably the first step that we would want to take. So just to set expectations, I would think an education period would be the very first thing we would need to do.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Grant. Councillor Shank.
I know we're going into the budget process, and I know it's going to be extremely difficult, but here's a prime example of about another bylaw officer that's going to be definitely sorely needed in this municipality. Just back to the survey, 59% of the residents wanted to see an increase in bylaw services. All right. And 55% felt the service bylaw enforcement was poor or very poor. So here it comes back down to this and the budget things, but that's another discussion that's the reason why I always love the data, because then you can make an informed decision with the data that you currently have. All right. And how we can go ahead and solve the solutions at the end. So we're solving these problems and at least hopefully managing these problems. So there we go.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. Councillor Martin, sorry I missed you there. So
Thank you, Mayor. I certainly am grateful for Matthew and Jessica's time and effort they put into this bylaw. I know it was a tremendous lot of work, and other staff as well. I'm concerned about a few things. One of them, of course, is Springside Park. I'm concerned that by protecting Conservation Park, we're throwing away Springside Park. And the two of them are connected by a boardwalk, for one thing. Springside Park is, in my mind, visited by more people over a 7-day stretch than Conservation Park. A lot of people are down there. I invite you to go down there and have a look on more than one occasion, and I think you'll see a lot of cars. Some of them are from out of town, which is good. You know, people come to our community and they want to explore our features that we have here. And I'm really concerned that by protecting one park only, and I understand why you did it. I know you're trying to make the legal process work. We don't know if that will, if somebody, but I'm concerned about a lot of things, and Springside is my biggest concern. But I'm also concerned about, like the deputy mayor mentioned, how we're going to enforce it. We have bylaws now in place. We have a burn bylaw. Me as a taxpayer and others can't have a fire pit in their backyard unless we have a burn permit. Encampment people, for some reason, can just put a few rocks in a circle and go ahead and light a fire. And if we stop them from doing that, they're not going to pay any attention to that anyway. So I'm very concerned that this bylaw doesn't doesn't do what we need it to do. I think we need to hold our county council and Payless to account. I think we need to hold Rick Breeze's feet to the fire. I think we need to hold Shelby Cramp's feet to the fire. All of those tier governments above us, they're pushing stuff down to us, and we don't have the resources to handle it all. So I would like I say, a little more push on our tiers above us. So I'm ranting on, I know, but this whole homeless issue bothers me because taxpayers don't seem to have the same rights as the homeless encampments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Did you want to comment, Mr. Grant? I can comment afterwards, but go ahead.
After you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't disagree with the bill. I agree with you 100%. Is that the homelessness issue is much bigger than our municipality. What we're attempting to do this evening and have attempted to do for the last number of months is to try and manage our parks. That's about all with the authority and the ability that we have. I can assure you that we are knocking on the doors of our upper tier government, and as well as our provincial friends and our federal friends for that matter, that we at the town of Greater Napanee don't have the ability to solve homelessness. I think if anybody agrees on anything, that's probably what we're going to agree on. But what we do have the ability to do, I hope, is to try and manage the situation that we have with respect to our parks. And that's, I know we have to keep in mind that bylaws are the lowest level of enforcement or laws that we have in this country, and we have to rely on our friends to help us out, the OPP, with respect to the Trespass to Property Act, which is a provincial statute, as well as our upper tier government. So I agree with exactly what you're saying with respect to the homelessness, but I think we need to try and focus on what we have the ability to try and do, and trying to manage the situation with the bylaw, I'll be quite honest with you, is at best a challenge, but we have to try and do something with it. And I think what we're seeing tonight is something that is enforceable, something that will stand the test of time with any type of challenge that we're going to get with it. Knowing fair well what we're doing tonight is not going to be perfect. And we understand that. And in the coming days, weeks, and months, we may have to adjust it, tweak it, and see what works, see what doesn't work. But I mean, I agree with I think it was Councillor Shank or Councillor Pennell that we've got to start somewhere. And we put a lot of time and effort into this, and I think that it's the best starting point that we have right now, I think. So, but I mean, nobody's kidding anybody is that we're not going to solve the homelessness or the unhoused situation that we have at the town of Greater Napanee with a bylaw. That's just ludicrous to suggest that we even would do that. But I'll go back to Bill and then I'll go to Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate what you're saying. And like I said, I appreciate what Jessica and Matthew has tried to do here. And I think they've done the best they can do within the law. And I'm not a heartless person. My worst fear is if someone were to freeze to death during the winter, or they have, God forbid, any kind of a situation where there's a fire and someone's hurt. So, but this bylaw just, I don't believe it's going to be enforceable myself personally. I'm sorry, but I believe that because we're not enforcing our other bylaws we already have, for one thing. I still think that the tiers of government above us has got to do a better job than they're doing right now. And that's all I'll say about that. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks. Thanks, Bill. I think Mr. Grant wants to weigh in as well.
Sure. I'll just, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll start generally, and I'll invite the clerk to have any specifics. So I'd first say, Councillor Martin, I agree with you in many capacities. Nobody wants this. Nobody wants this. Nobody would choose this. And this is the most difficult issue I've ever encountered in my 20 years of public service. I would say that in terms of the bylaw, and I've seen a number of iterations both here and in Hamilton and in other places, this is probably, we're shooting for reasonable. We've gone as far as we think is practical. And because if you go to court and lose, your ability to engage in other management strategies is curtailed through judgments of courts. So we're being very mindful of that. I would suggest even Conservation Park, and you've indicated that you're concerned that we're protecting one park and not another. Protecting a park in and of itself is going to the limit. It really is. And in my experience, working in this kind of file in Hamilton, is education goes a long way, but in the absence of identifying what the rules are, it's difficult to tell people what you would like them to do. And what we've done here is identified what the rules are, and Conservation Park in particular has the largest concentrations of children's play structures, which is why that area we've indicated should be an area that is protected, and happy to discuss that in further detail. And what I would also point out too is this has been the topic of conversation for municipal governments for very much for the last 4 years since the pandemic. And I would say I'm watching in recent weeks, this is very much becoming a conversation now on the provincial level in a way that I've never seen. I think that's very much to do with the advocacy you've seen from municipal organizations, including Roma, Big City Mayors, AMO. There has been a long campaign from municipal governments, candidly seeking help from senior orders of government who both have the mandate and the resources to address this issue better than us. And I'm watching those conversations happen now in provincial legislatures in a way that I have never seen in the last 4 years. I don't know where that's going to go, but what I would say, Councillor Martin, is there has been consistent advocacy from municipal governments across the province, across the nation. I know our own mayor has been advocating for that. I know members of council have had those conversations, and I'm seeing that message start to land. And candidly, my hope is that we manage as best we can with a tool which is imperfect. It just is, but it's the best that we can do. And my hope, and I would say now I'm cautiously optimistic, is we're going to see some support coming from senior orders of government. Jessica, if you had anything to add.
Yeah, through your worship, I just wanted to circle back to that conversation about is there a double standard around how our open air burning bylaw is applied? That is specifically why we've added this proposed language into the protocol. Because yes, when it is a matter that an attending firefighter believes that a fire is more likely to preserve life, health, and safety than to risk life, health, and safety, they have been permitting safe, contained, supervised, necessary fires to be had at encampment sites. We are looking to really spell out what those decision criteria are, what they are not. The fire department has also put out quite a few fires at encampments that were not safe, contained, necessary. And so we just wanted to make sure that the rules of engagement are clear for everybody, both for our housed and our unhoused residents in that area. And yeah, as Mr. Grant has said, we are seeking to be reasonable and defensible with this document. We do not believe it is perfect. We will continue to monitor its effectiveness. We fully plan to bring it back to you for further discussion on the sooner of changes to the current housing situation, significant changes to our number of unhoused residents, significant changes to provincial legislation, or just after it's been active for a few months and we've seen whether or not it's effective. One way or another, we will continue to be talking about this. But for now, we'll start with, assuming it is the will of council to pass this bylaw as it is, we will start with education and hope that that helps have a more productive conversation.
Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, go ahead, Bill, and then I'll go with Brian.
Just one quick, the sad thing is that the people in the homeless camps, they need help, and we as a municipality can't provide what they require, and we do need help from the upper tiers of government in this. And I mean, enacting a new bylaw, I think we're just making encampments, we're trying to legalize encampments almost by creating this bylaw. I just don't agree with the bylaw going to help us very much, if at all. And it's going to hurt, like I said, it's going to hurt Springside Park for the benefit of Conservation Park. If I don't think that's a good trade-off, but and I wish I could say it's going to solve all our problems. I just know it isn't. So, but I appreciate the effort that everybody went into. I really do, and I know why you did it. I just don't think it's going to work to our benefit.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Deputy Mayor Cower.
Thank you, through your worship. Councillor Martin, I agree with you 100% with the two parks, Conservation Park and Springside Park. The two are joined by virtually our only real walking trail that we have in Napanee. And Springside Park is used a lot. You go down there any time of day and it's very hard to find a parking spot down there. But I also understand why conservation, it's got more of the kids there, it's got the kids' playgrounds and so on and so forth. Would really like to have seen a model with both parks protected, because we do have quite a few other number of parks around that, but anyways, we got to start somewhere. We can sit and beat this thing to death all night long. This is a good start, but I personally, I'm like Bill, I'd like to see Springside and conservation protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cower. Councillor Shank.
I don't think there's anybody here that would love nothing better to protect both. But I echo what everybody has said too, is that we have to start somewhere. We have to manage the problem. But if we start to look at a different business model or a different way of doing things and see what we can do within the law, so we're not taken to court and lose. We always want to win, but we have to look internally also. So people that have substance abuse, let's look after our own. Number one, let's look after the residents of Napanee, our own. But what I find very difficult to swallow is that you can be a resident from Belleville or Prince Edward County or whatever, come here, get your 3 square meals that are given to you locally, get a tent locally, then you can have your substance abuse problem, get your drugs from wherever, all right? So we got to look at locally. Let's look after our local, manage our local first, and then we can go ahead and the people, maybe let's let them manage, instead of everybody, let them manage the ones that can be managed and the ones that came from different areas. So it's not, oh, we get to stay in the whole park, you know what I mean, for free, and we get our 3 square meals. Make it a little bit more difficult for those individuals, and the OPP will do their best part, and everybody else will do their best part. But we have to start somewhere, and we know where the problem is. At least I understand where the problem is. But how can you force somebody from not doing certain things to encourage that area to be in our area? So that's about as easiest way I can say it. So I better leave it at that.
Great, thanks, Councillor Shank. Mr. Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through Mr. Mayor, just a comment on Springside and Conservation Park. So I would agree that I would love us to be able to designate both parks. I don't know that would be considered reasonable in a court of law. I don't. And I would say, and the clerk and I have had many discussions on the protection of Conservation Park. If this bylaw is challenged, and they're challenged in many different municipalities, that's where we're going to get challenged. And I think I've seen a lot of success with distances from certain amenities. I've seen some success with trying to designate different areas. But the designating of whole areas is the part where people get challenged. So I think we've gone as far as we can with looking at one park. I think the majority of the distances cover the most of that park anyway. I think if we tried to extend that out, I candidly think we would go to court, and I think we would lose.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. Deputy Mayor Cower.
Through you, your worship. Bill, you also mentioned about Pellis. Right now, Pellis is spending just over $4 million on homeless around us here. And there is some talk for some other things, but it all comes back to one taxpayer. There's one taxpayer. I mean, like I say, just over $4 million right now being spent on it. So Pellis is doing what they can do with what they got. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cower. Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Deputy Mayor, I disagree with you 100%. Pellis is not doing enough. The county is not doing enough. The province is not doing enough. Neither is the federal government. But for you to say Pellis is doing enough, I'm sorry, you're wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. I think, first of all, is there any other comments or questions with respect to the bylaw that we have before us this evening? I think this is, I mean, let's face it, this is an issue. This is a problem. I didn't think I'd ever live long enough to see in town of Greater Napanee, but it's here. And it's not going away anytime soon. And contrary to what anybody else would say, that we as a lower tier government do not have the ability to eradicate the problem. It's as simple as that. What we do have the ability to do is attempt to manage something that we have very little control over. And I think by the institution of this bylaw, I'm hoping, and maybe I'm the eternal optimist here, but I'm hoping it's going to enable us to try and manage something that we are just not built to do. I mean, I agree with everything that's been said here tonight. I mean, we didn't ask for this problem. We didn't initiate this problem, but it has shown up on our doorstep, and we have to try and manage it. We have to think of not only the folks that are unhoused, but the folks in this community that are vulnerable, that use the parks, the green spaces, the areas that are owned by our municipality, by other municipalities, by the government. We have to try and protect those areas. Those are the vulnerable people that we need to protect. And I'm a firm believer that I'm not worried about being challenged, because I think we're being fair. I think we're being reasonable. And we're doing a job that probably is a decision that's going to have to be made at the Supreme Court level. We're trying to do it at a municipal level, which is completely and utterly insane. However, we're going to try and do it. So I have faith in this. I'm hoping they're not going to prove me wrong. I'm not going to guarantee you're not, but we do have to do something for the folks in this municipality that have been accustomed to using our parks, using our green spaces, using our sidewalks to try and protect them, and especially in a community that's has a lot of senior people, have a lot of young people. And obviously I'd be open to any other suggestions brought forward that can resolve this, eradicate this, but I've yet to hear those things. So I think we had to continue on the path that we're going, and hopefully with a little bit of luck, we're going to get some assistance from our upper tier governments, all of them, to try and resolve a problem that there's many people in this country, many people in this continent, many people in this world have tried and failed. So having said that, and I apologize for getting a little long-winded, is there anything further? We do have a recommendation, but is there anything further before we move on? Seeing none, we do have a recommendation. Just bear with me here. That council received for information the draft update Parks and Public Spaces bylaw and encampment review protocol. And further, that council adopt the Parks and Public Spaces bylaw at this meeting. Do we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Shank. Is there anything further that anyone would like to add? And I know that we probably could discuss this forever and ever and ever, but I'll make sure I give everybody the opportunity to say what they want to say. So is there anything further before we call for the vote? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on, and again, I just want to thank staff. It's you know, we've thrown we've thrown a task at our staff that many people in this world that haven't been able to resolve, and maybe we haven't either. I don't know. Only time will be the dictator of whether or not we've accomplished what little we can accomplish. But I just want to thank staff for all the hard work in it. We've, like I said earlier, we've had public meetings, we've had surveys, we've got legal opinions. I'm not certain there's any other stones that we could have overturned, and God bless, I hope that there isn't, but thank you, staff, for the hard work you've committed to this. So moving on, United Way request for banners and policy exemption. And Madam Clerk, are you going to speak to that?
So through your worship, this report is brought as a follow-up to a deputation the council received in September from the KFLNA United Way, looking for a number of exemptions to the town's community celebrations, proclamations, and art policy. It is not within staff's authority to approve any exemptions under this policy. Staff do have a recommendation here from an operations and policy perspective. Staff are supportive of some, but not all of the proposed requests, which we go into a little bit more detail in the report. But happy to take any questions from council.
Great, thanks, Jess. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns for Jessica with respect to her presentation or the report? Councillor Shank.
Jessica, the Remembrance Day banners, is there any conflict because it's September and October, or there's different banners, or that's would be my own concern is that Remembrance Day banners, you know, that's number one.
Yeah, so through your worship, the initial request from the United Way, they said they would love it if their program could extend into November, but they understand that it can't because we have our Remembrance Day banners up for that period of time. At this point, we have a recurring community request in June. We have Canada Day banners that go up in July. The summer months are fairly flexible at this point in time, as are the fall up until Remembrance Day.
Yep, go ahead,
May I ask Jessica, when did we put up the banners for Remembrance Day? Or Chris?
Through your worship, Councillor Shank. So we try to have the veterans banners up for a full month. So we did put them up about the second or third week of October so that we could have them up for approximately a full month.
So Chris and Jessica, whoever wants to answer it now, in the report it says September and October. Now, is there going to be a conflict of where the banners are? Or I just want to make sure that the remembrance banners have number one priority to wear over the United Way. You know what I mean? Because the reason why we have banners is because of them. So
there certainly could be a conflict, but we could also adjust when we put those ones up. So if the United Way banners needed to be up for the full month of October, if they needed to be, then we could potentially look at leaving the Remembrance Day banners up for longer after Remembrance Day. But it has been historical practice to have them up a month ahead of Remembrance Day.
Yep, go ahead, Mike.
this is just me. 1 month or whatever for Remembrance Day prior to that, but they get number one shot. All right, United Way or any other organization, I don't care what any organization is so as far as I'm concerned, if it is the second week of October, Remembrance Day, they go up the second week of October. They do not get pushed back because I'm a firm believer that reason why you're in a free country because your grandfather's, sacrificed. So and they continue, and, you know, for, all I'm saying is I'm very passionate about that. So that's just my own feeling. So I just want to make sure that the remembrance banners do not get kicked back or moved around. It's the United Way. If they want to come in a little bit earlier, fine, if that can work, but they do not get moved. You know, that's just my opinion.
And I agree with you. I agree with you, Mike. I think with respect to the United Way, I mean, I think they are probably under the understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jess, that if we do have any other people that come forward, they're going to have to share the flagpoles, or they're going to have to share the light standards. Am I correct with that? That say another organization that comes through council and we decide that we're going to display their banners, just because United Way got here first doesn't necessarily mean they own that time or that amount of time. Am I correct with that?
So through your worship, the policy as it is written right now states that the max that each guest banner displays is for a 1 month period. The exemption would be to extend that period. And then there is some language in the policy around how we would manage conflicting applications down the road should we ever get to that point. Looking at a number of things, including community presence, operations, availability to swap banners out. Based on the deputation that the United Way made, it did sound like their ability to run this program may be conditional financially on having a minimum period where their banners are up. I don't know what that point is for them. That might be a further point of conversation with them. Possibly they would be willing to have an earlier start point. But they did indicate that a 1 month period would probably not be long enough for this to be a financially viable campaign for them.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So Jessica, if Chris or you could, or Jessica, if you could contact them and just say, hey, you know, we'll start the middle of August. You get August, September, and the beginning of October, and then Remembrance Day goes on. So.
And I agree, Mike. I think that they just have to be aware that there may become a time when there's a conflict, and just because they're the first to the gate doesn't necessarily mean they own that 2 month period, right? So, but I agree with you in the fact that I think our Remembrance Day banners need to be up when they are up, and with all due respect, I mean, most other groups are going to have to work around that.
Maybe it's my age, but you don't put up a Christmas ornament until after November 11th. All right. There's certain protocols that Canada has in its history, and you respect the veterans of what they've had. And they only had 1 day, but they sacrificed so much. So I just want to make sure that doesn't slip through the, you know, I'm not saying anything against United Way. Don't get me wrong. They do a lot for the community also, but I just want to make sure.
No, and I agree with you. Is there something in our protocol, or is there something that needs to be in our policy or protocols that we need to adjust with respect to something like this? And is that something we should do prior to authorizing this request, Jess?
Through your worship, based on this discussion, I do think at some point we will probably want to just do a minor amendment to that policy language to clarify that the veteran banners are October 15th to November 15th, not the month of November, just to avoid any future confusion down the line. That would, I don't know that that's the timing of that needs to happen before or after consideration of this request, but it's certainly noted as something to adjust in the future.
Yeah, and this request is not going to take effect until next year anyways, right? So we've got some time on our side.
Through your worship, I believe we have a little bit of time. Applicants did indicate that should they receive approval, they would likely begin, I believe very early in the new year is when they begin their campaign for fundraising under this program. So a little bit of time, but not a lot of time.
Okay, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Cower.
Yeah, through you, your worship. Yeah, I don't have a problem with them having it going in early and having it up too when we go to put our Remembrance Day banners up. But I also want to make sure that we are not waiving the $460 fee, something we just adopted for banners up and down, and we shouldn't be even considering waiving that fee. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there anyone else that wishes to weigh in? Seeing none, we do have a recommendation, and I'll read through the recommendation that we have. Is that council receive for information the Executive Services United Way request for banners policy exemption report, and further that council support the request for an exemption to sections 5.5 and F and 5.5D of the community celebrations, proclamations, and art policy to permit the banners to be installed for a 2-month period in September and October, and without an accompanying proclamation request. And further, the council support the request for the United Banner program to operate for the remainder of the current council term through 2026, and further extensions to be at the discretion of the next term of council. And further, that council does not support any exemption to section 5.5DI in the form of the fee waiver. As I read through this, I'm the same as Mike. I have some concerns with respect to the conflict that's going to occur in the last 2 weeks of October with respect to the
Through your worship, we could certainly change that to say from August 15th to October 15th, if that would put council's concerns at ease.
I know for me that that makes me feel better. Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for council's awareness, the banners that are up before that are the Canada Day banners. And so we do have some wiggle room there in August. And I would suggest not making it a set date because it's really going to depend on what that date, what day of the week that falls on in any given year. And we basically look at what we have on our schedule and determine what the best time is to get those up in terms of operations. And so I would just caution you on picking a specific date.
From mid-August to mid-October.
Extremely good point, Chris, and thank you for bringing that up. That makes all the sense in the world. So, so where are we? So we do have a recommendation, and I think if we tweak that recommendation to permit the banners to be installed for a 2-month period from the mid-August through to mid-October, does that suffice, Madam Clerk?
Through your worship, I believe that suffices for town staff's purposes. We will have to see if that is going to work for our applicants, but we can be in contact with them after whatever decision council makes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So is there any other conversations, and would somebody like to make that by motion? Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Pennell. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to the motion that is on the floor? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. 2024 holiday closure and holiday party. And I see Holly coming up. So when you get settled, Holly, the floor is yours.
Through you, Your Worship, thank you for taking the time to hear about this report tonight. So the reason I'm bringing this report forward is we've identified a lack of policy around our holiday closure, which has been past practice for the last number of years, especially since we moved to 99 Advance Avenue. Through this findings, we've identified the lack of policy, which I will and do intend to bring forward to you in the future. But as we are mid-November, I figured it was important to do a report to get your insight now and get your approval or not, so we can move forward, and then a formal policy will follow. So the report in front of you today suggests 3 things. First is a 2024 holiday closure of our 99 Advance location. So this would be an office closure from noon on December 24th until January 1st. This encompasses all of our stat holidays, including Christmas, our half-day Christmas Eve, Boxing Day, half a day for New Year's Eve, and a full day for New Year's Day. We're looking at, in terms of a closure that isn't a stat holiday, 3 days, which is a half day on December 24th, December 27th, December 30th, and a half day on December 31st. For staff who are working at 99 Advance Avenue, would have two choices if we are to move forward with the closure. First is they can use vacation time to cover off these 3 days. And second is that they can still come into the office and work those 3 days, but the office would not be open to the public. So our customer service and our front desk would not be open for the public to come in and ask questions. During this period, we do see both an increased number in vacation requests from staff, and that's the reason this report is coming in front of you today. But we also see a decrease in requests from the public, both on the phone and in person during this holiday time. So it's a good time to look at something like this going forward. I just want to be clear that this closure does not affect our recreation staff or recreation facilities, our utility staff, our public works staff, or our fire staff. All of these services would remain open and our employees would work as scheduled as usual. So that's the first. Second is we do offer customer service at our recreation facility, at the desk, at our arena. If we are to move forward with this office closure, would that desk follow the same as the rest of our administration at 99 Advance, or would it remain open? And finally, and I apologize for putting so much information out in front of you all at once, but the final request is around a holiday party. So during our negotiations with our unions, as well as our compensation bylaw review, it was identified from our staff that there is interest in hosting a holiday party this year and in the future. So looking for your support on hosting a holiday party for our staff, which would result in a 2-hour closure of services, because we were thinking of a lunch, which we've done in the past. So we'd be closed from between 11 and 1 on the day of the holiday party. This party also gives us an opportunity to celebrate years of service and thank our employees for all that they've done and accomplished throughout the year. So looking forward to your comments and questions around this report, and happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Holly. Go ahead, Mike, and then I'll go to, I think, Dave.
Well, holiday party, I totally agree with, because I mean, every business has a holiday party. So the employees need to get together, how to celebrate the year, years of service. It's morale building. So I totally agree with that. Now, every other service is working except 99 Advance, and they're getting, tell me if I'm getting this wrong though. So they get 2.5 days off extra?
Through you, your worship, to Councillor Shank. No, they don't get any additional days off. It's that the physical office would be closed to the public.
Yep.
And staff that's home bases out of 99 Advance Avenue would have the choice to either use vacation to compensate for those days and not come into the office at all, or come into the office and work those regular days, but knowing that it's closed to the public, so they won't be receiving any in-person or telephone calls.
Yep, go ahead, Mike.
I'm not delicate at all, and I know I'm going to say this wrong. So if it's closed, be closed. To give the option for an employee to come in when everybody else is there saying they're going to come in and work. If it's an 8-hour day, don't tell me you're going to be working all 8-hour days when nobody's going to be there. That's like working from home. And we have found that throughout Canada, working from home, the production is not the same as if you go to work. So my option is let them, the ones that want to take their time off, but if you're going to be closed, that's it. You can take your holiday time off or whatever, but you're not going to come in and say that you're going to work a full day during Christmas and New Year's for 2.5 days. Now, maybe am I being the pessimist or what? I don't know. Maybe somebody correct me. I know I'm not politically correct, but there you go.
No, I'm starting to see hands everywhere here, Mike. So who wants to start? Do you want to start, Mr. Grant? Then I can go to Holly and go to Ellen, I think. I'm sure they'll be generous.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor. just for context, as the manager of HR has mentioned, this has been past practice. It is practice in other municipalities, but as a leadership team, we identified a policy gap. And it's, you know, as we will be discussing service levels in the new year, I would suggest this is a service level. To give context for other municipalities I've worked at, their rationale often for having a holiday closure is because the days are kind of sporadic, half a day here, half a day over there. To like, it's challenging to maintain business continuity, if you will, when you have those kinds of disruptions, holiday disruptions. So some people find it easier just to close for that time. In terms of requiring people to take vacation, that's a bit of a challenge if we're closing and saying you must, hence we gave the option. We do have, I believe, unless I'm proven to be wrong, the ability to do that, but that's why we wanted to give the option and the rationale for it. But in terms of bringing it forward, we had flagged it as, okay, this is something that has happened, but there isn't a resolution, there isn't a policy around it, and it is a service level change, which is why it's here. In terms of people going in and working, selfishly, I go in those days all the time because I get a ton of work done. But with that, I'm sure we have other hands.
Yeah, I think I've seen a bunch. Ellen, did you want to go next? I think I see your hand. I think I may have seen Madam Clerk's here, so go ahead, Ellen.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add for context as an example of when a staff member may choose to work. It would be similar to myself. So again, that time between Christmas and New Year's, from a financial perspective, is really important time in our calendar. So I choose to work those days, given the kind of the priorities that we have based on the calendar. And I choose to take my vacation days in advance of Christmas, like the week leading into that. So for me, that's what works. And I just think that there could be other instances throughout the organization where that may come into play, but I just wanted to provide context for council members' consideration.
Thanks, Ellen. Madam Clerk, did you want to weigh in, or did I think Holly had her out too? Are you good there? Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
No, don't all everybody get the tar and feather out right away. All right, but I went to attended St. Albans Church or St. Albans Center for Remembrance Day. I didn't see one government employee there. Everybody got the government and they had their day off. So where were they? So all I'm saying is why should it always be, now don't get me wrong, if you're a government employee, you get this holiday, that holiday, everybody else is working, banks were closed, this was closed, but every factory was still working, every other one was working. So all I'm saying is yeah, how do you say to the taxpayer that you know you're gonna get a major tax increase this year for what we're coming down, but we're gonna decrease the level of service, all right? So the government workers, don't get me wrong, I know I'm saying it wrong already, that you can get another 2.5 days off between Christmas and New Year's. You know it's gonna be like a swallowing a lead bullet, you know what I mean? For the average Joe. So maybe I'm wrong, okay, and I'll leave it at that.
No, I mean, nobody is getting a day off free. The time that they're going to be taken off is going to come out of their bank. But I mean, and I know what you're saying, Mike, is so at what point does the onus fall upon the managers to ensure? I'm not sure how this is going to play out. Do we have to have people established prior to it? It's the same as taking a regular day off. Doesn't matter what day of the week it is. Somebody has to say, okay, I need this day off. They have to go to their supervisor, their manager, and say, I'm taking off next Wednesday, because I got something on the go. We all get that. This process here, would that happen prior to obviously the week in between Christmas and New Year? So you're going to canvass your staff and say, okay, who's coming in, who's not? And if somebody's coming in, who's going to be the boss? Does that make sense?
Through you, your worship. In the past, managers have been made aware in advance of the holiday closure that they would be required, especially if their entire team was using their vacation bank for this time. Managers were aware that they would be required to be available by phone, and typically our phones are emails and Teams as well, during that time, to have somebody in the department available, obviously in case of emergencies, and know that they can call their staff if needed. But typically, what we see is because of the decrease in both call volume and in-person requests, we don't see a major need for, and we haven't seen managers receiving a ton of calls during this time because other people are celebrating the holidays as well.
Yeah, okay, right. Go ahead, Bill, and then I'll go to Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. Merry Christmas, everybody. Councillor Shank isn't the Grinch who stole Christmas. I know he wouldn't be like that. But anyway, Christmas is on a Wednesday. Boxing Day is Thursday. It wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense to me to have somebody come in just for the Friday. I don't understand why we can't close 99 Tuesday, open back up the following Monday or whatever. And I mean, the days are so few, and we deserve to, the staff have worked hard all year. They deserve a little bit of camaraderie and time off with the family. That's what I believe personally. Everybody else may have their own opinion, but as far as the arena staff goes, there's two of them there. I don't know if you could split them up and have one, like because there's Boxing Day tournaments, there's minor hockey tournaments, so somebody has to be working at the arena. So, but if there's two on, maybe we can get by with one.
Through you, your worship, that's totally council's decision if you want to keep that desk open, and then their manager would be responsible for operationally how and when they would be available during that time.
Yeah, and thanks, Bill. I think we were going to get to there, but thanks for getting us there. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Cower. I totally get if we say we're closed, boom, period. Then we are paying those employees to stay home because that's our choice to close. If we say you can take the time off if you like, and those that want to come into work, and those that want to take the time off, book their holidays, take the time off. Pretty straightforward.
Through your worship, even we're we're closing. The suggestion is to close 99 Advance Avenue to the public, but not close it to our staff. So that's why the two options are available. In some cases, and I can't speak for staff on this, they may not have vacation to use. They haven't planned to use it these days. So they may be required to come into the office and work those days. And to Ellen's point previously, some of these days are key days. So you don't have the disruptions and you can really focus in and drill in on your job. However, nobody, and I'm not suggesting a free day off for anybody, particularly because this isn't being offered to all of our staff. What we're suggesting as part of this report is that the office physically closes to the community on those days, but no free days are being given in any situation. Employees either work or they use their vacation time, which they receive as part of their employment contracts in order to get those days off.
Okay, that's more clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Cower. Is there any other conversations that we want to have? And thanks, Bill, for bringing up. I think you bring up a very good point about the arena. The time between Christmas and New Year's is fairly busy time up at the Best and Bass Arena. I know that there's a number of minor hockey tournaments up there. You got the Boxing Day tournament, which is on the 26th, which I know doesn't necessarily, we won't have anybody there because it's a statutory holiday, but that time between Christmas and New Year's is a fairly busy time up there. So probably the busiest time that we actually have. So I like the suggestion of having somebody maybe available to work up there, whether it doesn't need to be a full complement, but I think we should probably cover that off anyways. But go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, I was just going to comment the same thing. Whereas as long as there's one person up there, let them work it out themselves between them and their manager. You know, they can trade off, one person works Christmas Eve, the other one works New Year's Eve, that sort of stuff, split up the days and then go from there. As long as there's one person there, it should be fine. But, you know, who are we to get in the mix of that? Just let them and their manager do it. Thanks.
Sounds like a job for Mr. Grant. Is there anything else? And I know that council, I think if nothing else that's come out of this, it's become quite apparent that we probably should have some form of a policy or process evolving around this, just so we can be consistent from year to year. And I know that Christmas falls sometimes on a Monday, sometimes on a Thursday, but I think we need to be consistent with it for sure. Councillor Nari.
Maybe just because of my past life, death happens over that time. Is there an avenue for a funeral home to get a hold so they can get a gravesite? I hate to say this, but you can't wait a week sometimes. Would there be an avenue to think about phone calls that funeral homes can contact? If I say it, then it's not going to happen. But seriously, that's one serious area that you just can't have someone lying around, as I say.
Through your worship, I believe that would be covered off by the managers being available by phone over that time. And in a situation where something like that happened, our staff know, like in those positions, know that those things happen and are compensated as a result of such if they get called in for an emergency like that.
Yeah, and thanks, Bob. I know that there are other things that do happen over that. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen between Christmas and New Year's. Fate would have it, right? So, we do have to ensure that there is some form of contact for if we go down this road, that there's some form of contact at the town for something that needs to be done, because, like I say, as fate would have it, it'll happen between Christmas and New Year's. So, Mr. Grant.
So thank you, Mr. Renner. Just to reiterate, so I have every confidence in staff that those will take their vacation appropriately, work appropriately. And why this is coming forward is you're gonna see me in the coming months be really diligent in that if there is a change in the level of service that the organization is providing, we're going to seek approval for it. Service levels, from my perspective, are set by council. And, you know, I'm a big believer in policy and process and procedure. And if we don't necessarily have one around it, and we didn't here, we'll come and seek your permission to alter service levels for an operational reason, and then we'll look to put a policy around it. So I appreciate, I don't think you're the Grinch, Counselor. But in all honesty, you know, and I know staff is committed to making sure that even the smaller things here, that we're diligent about making sure that we do things the right way. And then on the larger things, we'll do the same, which is why you'll see us bringing forward service levels, filling various policy gaps. Because if we have a question about, is this something that, you know, is written down anywhere? And if it's not, we're going to make sure it is. And that's why it's coming here today. So just in case there's any questions on that.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. And I will look for a motion to go past 10 o'clock because we're there now. So moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. And away we go back into the discussion. So is there anything further? We do have a recommendation, but is there anything further we'd like to add, or is there any questions or comments that we need to hash out? It's actually been a pretty good conversation. Seeing none, we do have a staff recommendation that council received for information. I'm probably going to look to Madam Clerk to help me clean this up a little bit, but council received for information the 2024 holiday closure holiday party report. Further, that council support the holiday closure and holiday party. And further, that council request administrative coverage at the Best and Bash Arena during this period of closure. And hopefully I've left that open enough. And further, that staff bring back a policy with respect to the holiday closure and holiday party. Did I do good there, Jess, or am we good with that? Okay. Yep. well, let's put a motion on the floor and then we can have a conversation, or Mike. No. Moved by Councillor Norrie, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
All right, so my concern is that you're gonna close the arena staff, you know what I mean, in the front staff. The holiday would result in 2 hours, holiday closure would result, all right, in the arena administrative desk to be closed to the public from the 24th half, 27th, 30th, 31st, and the half day.
No, we took that out and
That
to
out?
ensure that there is administrative coverage during that period of time. And we'll leave that administrative coverage and how it is done to Mr. Grant and his very capable staff. Yep, go ahead.
So
Go
not
ahead,
to
Mike.
belabor this and be a real bah humbug, and it's after 10. If you're gonna have that, and if you have staff that are gonna work at 99 events, why not have one person in the front say, you know, if somebody has a concern or come in, because you know our phone tree is just so great, you know what I mean? So if you have that many staff there, why not have somebody at the front that can answer?
I think Holly is going to respond. Go ahead, Holly.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Shank. The reason that this is being suggested is because we have a wildly increased number in requests for vacation. So even if we had someone at the front desk, there may not be someone on the other ends of the phone other than the managers to answer. So rather than picking up the phone to an empty line, we'd rather give better service by being closed altogether and being fully available on the days that we are open.
So you're telling me, so therefore 90% of our staff are gonna go ahead and take their holidays at 99 events between Christmas and New Year's?
Go ahead, Holly.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Shank, I can't speak to the percentage of people that are going to have vacation available to use during that time. However, if the closure is approved and they do have vacation to use during that time, which we are seeing based on the number of requests is obviously higher than usual, then yes, we will see a decrease in the number of employees physically working during that closure period, which is 3 days.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Shank. Is there anything further anyone would like to add? And we do have a motion that's on the floor. Seeing none. All in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks. It was a good discussion. So up next is Infrastructure Services, Utilities, Water Pollution Control Plant, WPCP Contractor Pre-Qualification Report. And Mr. Nobes, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Worship. Staff this evening are before council seeking approval to authorize the list of pre-qualified contractors in the streams of general contractor, electrical, and mechanical related to the water pollution control plant expansion. We had gone out for a request for pre-qualification process, which was completed by finance staff through our normal channels. We received a number of submissions, and those submissions are included in the report on page 4 of the report towards the bottom. So through that, we had identified some minimum submission requirements. So we were really looking for a detailed history of the company, their annual construction volume, their project experience, the CVs for the staff that would be assigned to the project, and any litigation history, as well as health and safety policies. With that, we were looking ideally to balance who can perform the work and who has the capability. And through the tendering process, we'll balance with who's the most cost effective ultimately. So what this process has allowed us to do is essentially review the resumes per se of all of these companies and identify which of those groups in the general contracting, electrical, and mechanical subtrades would be the best fit for this scale of project ultimately. So we had a number of, I'll say, combo pack submissions. So for example, North American Construction submitted for all three, general, electrical, and mechanical. Maple Rinders submitted for general and mechanical, but not electrical. And we had just electrical and just mechanical in some instances as well. So we had reviewed the submissions, and we are ultimately recommending that for general contracting, we pre-qualify. So this means that these groups would be able to submit a tender submission, and effectively we would be recommending most likely the low bid through the tender process. So this is doing the heavy lifting that we would typically do during the tendering process, but we're doing this concurrently as we finalize and get to 100% design status. So it's really an effort to streamline our timelines, given the tight timelines that we have to work within for funding requirements. So we're looking to advance this to get I'll say the heavy lifting out of the way through the review of the pre-qualification documents. And as we get tender submissions in, it's really just a matter of seeing who's the low bid within each stream. So with that, we're ultimately recommending Romag Contracting Limited for the general contractors. We're recommending Romag Contracting, Peak Construction, North American Construction, Maple Rinders Constructors, Graham Construction and Engineering. On the mechanical side, we're recommending ProPipe Construction Division of Dalcon Constructors, PCL, Peak Construction Group, North American Construction, and Maple Rinders. And on the electrical side, we're recommending Industrial Electrical Contractors of Brockville Limited, Sheridan Electrical Services, and North American Construction. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that council might have, but staff's intent here is to hopefully get approval or an authorization to finalize this list, notify those groups, and very shortly thereafter get our tender document posted publicly.
Councillor
I move staff recommendation. It's beyond me.
Nori. Right, straight to the point. We do have a motion on the floor, and I'll have a question. We do have a motion. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Shank. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns with respect to the motion that's on the floor? And I see Councillor Pennell. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Worship. Just a comment, Michael, the process seemed to work. We got a fair amount of people to choose from, so there's going to be competition in the bid, which is nice to see. And it was also nice to see some very recognizable names and large companies included in here. So it's nice to see.
Through your worship, we were luckily able to grab the attention of these well-known groups that undertake this level of work quite often. So it's good to see. We were a little bit concerned with only having 3 electrical, but we do have 3 qualified electrical that's submitted. So we'll have ultimately a qualified electrical contractor. When we saw them coming in, we thought, ooh, hopefully we have more, but 3 is enough to make it competitive. So we're ultimately satisfied.
Yeah, very nice to see. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Is there anything else? Seeing none, just for me, Mike. So obviously there's going to be three different tenders that go out, one for the general, one for electrical, one for the mechanical. And just for my own peace of mind or my own thoughts, is that if some big outfit blows into town and says, hey, I want a piece of this action, that they're not getting a piece of this action, that they've already had their opportunity, or will they have the opportunity? Obviously, it's difficult to give them the opportunity if they haven't been pre-authorized or pre-checked, I guess, right?
Through your worship, that's correct. So the tender documents will only go to those pre-qualified groups as a result of this process. Yeah. So we did our public, I'll say, call for tenders, if you will, call for pre-qualification documents. Any group could have submitted anything associated with that, but this list submitted, and these are the usual players. So yeah, ultimately, no, those that are not pre-qualified would not get, I'll say, the tender documents to respond to.
Okay, no, that's good. Councillor Shank.
Now, Mike, because they're all well-known and they know each other. I know on certain jobs, if, from one bids on this one, well, I'll bid really high, so you can get it, and they play that game. If they're gonna go ahead and anybody plays that game, can they all be disqualified, and we're just gonna go ahead and, parts, material? Because, I mean, there's other electrical firms that are in the area that might be able to do it, but it's such a huge job, you know what I mean? So that's what my little concern is that if something came in and they were all fairly high, and you know that they're playing the game of what they're bidding and what they're not bidding, can we still have the option to say, no, I'm sorry, we're not interested?
Through your worship, through the tendering process, ultimately the final decision, whatever the decision is, rests with the town. So if we are suspicious of that, we're not anticipating that given the construction volume for quite a number of these outfits. We're anticipating it to be a competitive process. But yes, ultimately, if there is an issue, it's up to the town's discretion entirely. I'd be hesitant to start a construction any later than where we're planning, just given our timelines. But yes, we do have that ability.
I just want to make sure that the municipality is covered. That's all.
Yep, no, it's better be safe than sorry. Is there any other questions or comments? We do have a motion on the floor. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Lennox and Addington County Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee Correspondence Accessible Transportation. Do we have many staff that are going to speak to this, or can I lean on the Deputy Mayor, seeing as you're part of that committee?
Yeah, the October 22nd meeting of the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, they'd like to see if the Lennox Addington County Joint Accessible Advisory Committee requests that the county's lower tier municipalities investigate any available accessible transportation options. It's come to the light that there's not a lot of accessibility, whether it's the buses or accessibility cabs in the areas, whatever, to be able to deal with people with disability. And we didn't know whether that's something that could be done with our partnerships with Deserano Transit, and whether Loyalists could do something with their partners with their transit. It was just put out there as a question.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. I'm not sure, is there, Mr. Grant, can you speak to that? I know the transit system we have that we're in partnership with Deserano. They have the ability, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I know they have the stickers on the side of the bus for accessibility stuff, but I don't know how that fits into this conversation.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, and members of council, I think it would depend on the scope of what we were looking to do. We don't run our own transit service, but we're a contributor of. We could certainly ascertain what are the abilities for Deseronto Transit to provide accessible transportation. Does it meet the standards that someone might be looking for? I know other municipalities who run a transit system often have a separate service, often referred to as the handy bus. So it would invariably depend on the level of service that would be looking to be provided, but I can certainly explore that with Deseronto Transit and see what it is that they offer, and report back to council and see if there would be anything else that would be looking to see what they would be doing, and that would likely come with a contribution cost.
Yep, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So the county is spearheading, so is the county's going to fund this option?
Deputy Mayor Calvert.
Yeah, there was no discussion on funding or even what a model might look like. It was just a simple request, wondering if there was any availability for opportunities for partnership. I think that the Deserano Transit bus has one bus, and I don't know what route it's on or nothing. I'll have to get more information on that.
Go ahead, Mr. Grant.
So just to follow up with that, in terms of accessible transit, quite often the standard is call for service, as opposed to a routed system. And so typically in a larger municipality, when we're talking about accessible transit, someone would call, they would book a service, it would arrive at a certain time, it would drop them off, it would pick them up. So I know Toronto Transit runs on a specific loop. And so I can take a look at the accessibility on that loop in terms of an accessible service and their ability or interest in providing that. I can collect that information and provide it back to the county who has sought from us information, I believe, to learn what is possible. And I can certainly have the town of Greater Napanee do our part and explore what options, if any, are available.
Thank you, Mr. Grant, for taking that on, and we appreciate that. So is there any other questions or comments? We do have a recommendation that council receive for information of correspondence from Langston and Addington County Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee. Moved by Deputy Mayor Cower, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Bylaws. We do have a bylaw number 2024-0065 to regulate, manage, and protect the use of maintenance of public parks, public open spaces, and other public facilities in the town of Greater Napanee. We'll look for a motion to put it on the floor. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Pennell. Ready first, second, and finally passed this 12th day of November, 2024. All in favor of the motion that's on the floor? Opposed? The motion's carried. Information reports from members. Are there any members that have any information reports they'd like to share with us this evening? Seeing none. Inquiries. Are there any inquiries that members would like to ask staff that they can try and answer for us and bring back at a future council meeting? Notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion this evening that any members of council would like to put on the books here? Seeing none. New business. Is there any new business that we will entertain tonight? Seeing none. Announcements. Is there any announcements any members of council would like to make this evening? Councillor Nori.
Thank you. Just a real big thank you to the people of this town. Monday, our cenotaph was full. It was, despite the weather. The turnout was excellent. But on top of that, for years, I've been one of the ones emptying those little boxes in the stores and taking the money out. And this town is very generous, even during these hard times. I noticed I had to go every other day to most of the stores. So thank you to this town for supporting our troops and our Legion. And you'll get a full report from the Legion later, but it's just fantastic town.
Thank you, Councillor Nori, and very well said. You're absolutely, I was quite impressed with the turnout that we had there, even though the weather wasn't all that great. And you know, we had folks from all the corners of this municipality. We had school kids, we had seniors, we had people from everywhere. So, and it was a very touching event. And I'm always impressed with the flying club out of Kingston that flies over just at the exact right time. So, it's a very, very well organized and very well attended event, and thank you for bringing that up. Councillor Shank.
I'll echo what Bob Nori has said, that St. Albans, and what I noticed very much, which I love about the community, you had to look to see if somebody wasn't wearing a poppy. Everybody was wearing a poppy in this community. It shows that they have, you know, the faith in the ancestors and the commitment of the Canada and what they've done. And, you know, I thought that's what it was, something else. And St. Albans, it was pretty well filled too. And we had people from Lieutenant Colonel and a Colonel from RMC, and Bill Peters was a former commandant of RMC, I believe. And they let it off and talked about Korea and all the veterans and stuff like that. It was very good service. So everybody was wearing a poppy. That was good.
Absolutely glad to hear that, Mike, and thanks for mentioning that. Deputy Mayor Calver.
Yeah, the Legion, we had quite a surprise at the Legion. We actually had an actual Mountie in dress, in uniform at the Legion. So that was very nice to see that as well, for him to come all the way from Montreal for that.
Yep. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Those red surges, they really jump when everything else is gray, don't they? Is there anything else? Mr. Grant, CAO remarks. Are there any remarks that you would like to make this evening?
I would, I'm going to echo some of council's commendations for the work that's been done on the parks bylaw and the encampment protocol. Specifically, and also the work that I know that many of the members of our staff, both from Public Works, the fire departments, bylaw services, legislative services, on the work that they've done not only on this particular piece of municipal legislation, but the ongoing work that they're doing in the community under what are some very difficult circumstances. And I know this won't be a surprise to council, but our teams are encountering a lot of difficult circumstances, and they're seeing some things that in the course of your workday you may not want to see. They're seeing people living in difficult circumstances, some health and mental health emergencies. And I would say that having dealt with this in a larger municipality, I'm watching our teams handle it with professionalism and grace. And a lot of compassion for both those that are affected or unhoused and those that are affected by the challenge who are housed. I think that it's a tremendous piece of work that we've done to try to manage this. And I think the work that the teams are doing under very difficult circumstances continues also to be tremendous along those lines. And I just thought I'd be remiss if I didn't say that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Grant, and very well said. The forward calendar. We have the forward calendar and the Q4 2024 forward calendar and the 2024 council resolution tracker. We've all had an opportunity to look at that. Is there anything in those two documents that anyone has any questions for? Seeing none, look for a motion to confirm the proceedings of the council, the corporation, and town of Greater Napanee. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Pinal. Ready first, second, and finally passed this 12th day of November 2024. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? The motion is carried, and the motion for adjournment moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Norrie. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thanks, folks. We covered a lot of ground tonight, and sorry to keep everybody up, but we had a lot of work to do tonight. So thanks, and we'll see you next week.